Here's Steve in Oxford. Go ahead, Steve.
Hi, George.
Hi, mate. Go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of points. I think you're right about the way the media cover certain events, and certainly bad news seems to be good news, if you'll pardon the pun, and good news doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But more importantly, I think one of the things that comes home to me is that, it was quite provocative what went on.
Yeah.
There are laws for incitement to cause a riot, incitement to cause violence, both of which this is on the fringe of, just the same as if the BNP set up a protest in the middle of Southall as any Asian community was celebrating something. If 20 of them turned up and started waving banners about get out of our country.
Although that has frequently happened, Steve.
Yeah, and on both counts, George, I think one of the things we're missing is the police's role in all this. And what you've got to understand, and I've got a very strong view about this, is that the politicians not only control the media, but the police force in this country are basically servants of the politicians. And the decisions that are made by police forces in regard to how they handle situations are mainly to please political correctness and to please the politicians rather than what's best for the people. If those people had a just argument for their protest, which, as you quite rightly say, there's fanatics. I mentioned the BNP again. There's fanatics on all sides. The way that people like that should be dealt with is if they want to say something, take it to the Houses of Parliament, take it to somewhere, take it to your local MP, somebody like yourself, and put your point across properly. Don't go and do something that's provocation. There's people there that have watched friends die. They don't choose. They're armed. They're in the armed forces. They're under instruction. They went to fight a war on our behalf. And if the country was invaded next week, we'd look at the same people to protect you, me, and everybody else listening to the radio.
Well, Steve, they didn't go to fight a war on our behalf. They went to fight a war against the wishes of the majority of this people.
I'll rephrase that, George. What I'm saying is, you know and I know that a foot soldier who's come back from a tour of duty...
He doesn't deserve that. Yeah, no, you're right.
He's not a politician, George. He doesn't want to... Probably doesn't... If the truth's known, doesn't want to be there any more than you or I want him to be there.
Well, I hope so, Steve, but you're right.
Swearing at them, and the thing that put the cocked hat amongst it for me, or the icing on the cake, was when the police arrested a 63-year-old gentleman who saw fit to protest back at the protesters. Again, it is...
Let me pick up a couple of points you've made, Steve. As somebody who has been in the last couple of months struck by a police officer whose daughter has been knocked down on one weekend and stood on in a second weekend by the police, I can assure you the police are not politically correct. The police are not acting as some kind of liberal avant-garde on behalf of The Guardian and The Independent. Trust me, that's not the case. Secondly, outside the Israeli embassy, whilst phosphorus bombs were raining down on trapped refugees, 1.5 million of them, and massacring children in Gaza, outside the Israeli embassy, a group of pro-Israeli demonstrators were allowed by the police to march along the front of our demonstration, waving Israeli flags and pro-Israeli placards in conduct that was equally likely to cause a breach of the peace. Now, I think these people in Luton should have been ushered away by the police because their conduct was likely to cause a breach of the peace. But let's not get it out of perspective. That's all I'm saying, Steve.
No, I think both your points are excellent, George. And, ironically, what you're saying actually has a lot of synergy in what I'm saying. I don't think the police do a particularly good job. I think they're wrapped up in paperwork. And I do think, you've been knocked to the ground. I don't want to go into details, but I was basically at a witch hunt by a local police force against me for several years, which came to nothing and cost the taxpayer thousands. It was a white-collar incident. And I just think, somebody's got to be answerable for the way that the police are policing the community, and I think...
Quite right.